It was billed as just another political roundtable. ABC's Election Edge had teased the episode all week. 2 voices, 2 Americas, 1 conversation. But behind the glossy promos and neutral-toned studio was a storm waiting to break, one that neither the producers nor the audience were fully prepared for. Navarro, seasoned commentator, longtime co-host of The View, and a loud critic of Trump-era conservatism, walked onto the set with practiced confidence. She wore a crimson blazer like a warning light. Her notes were color-coded, her tone sharpened from years in the arena. On the other side sat Karoline Leavitt, only 27, yet already a former White House press secretary and now a rapidly rising figure in the conservative movement. Her crisp beige jacket gleamed under the studio lights. A silver cross hung quietly from her neck, a symbol she never took off. Some dismissed her as the Gen Z mouthpiece of MAGA. Others called her the voice the right didn't know it needed. But tonight, she wasn't here to be defined. She was here to challenge everything the media believed about youth, power, and leadership. The moderator began with polite introductions, but Navarro wasted no time. "You're passionate, Karoline. I'll give you that," she said, her smile tight. "But passion alone isn't leadership. You're 27. You're just getting started. It takes more than conviction to run a country. It takes experience." Karoline didn't react. Not yet. Navarro went on. "Frankly, I find it dangerous that people look at someone your age and think, that's who should speak for us. We don't need influencers. We need leaders," the audience murmured. A few clapped. Karoline's expression remained calm, but behind her eyes, something shifted. She had been underestimated before, in classrooms, newsrooms, even the White House press briefing room. She knew the script. They'd call her too young, too loyal, too loud, too faithful, and then they'd smile as if they were doing her a favor. But not tonight. She glanced toward the crowd, then back at Navarro, and said nothing. Yet. The moderator tried to steer the conversation to policy, but the damage was done. The air was already thick with something electric. The clash wasn't just ideological. It was generational, cultural, personal. Backstage, producers leaned in toward their monitors. The control room buzzed. Karoline Leavitt hadn't spoken a full sentence yet. But when she did, the room and the narrative would never be the same. The moderator attempted to lighten the mood. "Let's talk about the generational divide in politics," he said with a forced chuckle. "Karoline, what do you think young conservatives want right now that's being overlooked?" Karoline turned slowly toward him. Her voice was calm, yet razor-sharp. "They want to be heard, without being mocked, without being told they're just kids with opinions that don't count until they're old enough to be cynical." The audience sat still. "They want jobs that don't vanish under government red tape, borders that mean something, faith that's not treated like a punchline, and schools that teach reading, not reprogramming." A few gasps, some claps. Navarro shifted in her chair, visibly irritated. "That's a cute list, Karoline. But politics isn't a youth rally. It's about governance, managing systems, diplomacy, things that take decades to learn." Karoline tilted her head. "Are you suggesting only the old can lead?" Anna smirked. "I'm saying the country shouldn't be led by someone who just got their first apartment. You might be able to stir people online, Karoline, but real leadership takes more than viral videos and catchy outrage." The words stung, and they were meant to. Karoline let a beat of silence settle over the room. Then she spoke. "Funny. When a 29-year-old bartender from New York became a congresswoman, you called her brave, visionary. But when I challenge your beliefs at 27, I'm too young to lead. Seems like it's not about my age, Anna. It's about my politics." That hit hard. The crowd reacted instantly, a mix of cheers and gasps. Anna's smile faded. Karoline pressed forward, voice steady. "You say I haven't lived enough. But I've lived through watching my parents lose a business during lockdowns your friends in Washington enforced. I've watched my generation drown in student debt while Congress debated what they wore. And I've worked in the White House while you sat on talk shows and dismissed every voice that didn't echo yours. Navarro tried to cut in, but Karoline wasn't finished. Experience matters, Anna. But experience without results? That's called careerism. And I'm not here for a career. I'm here for a mission. The studio was silent. Even the moderator leaned back, eyebrows raised. Backstage, a producer whispered, "Did she just flip that entire argument in one sentence?" Yes, she did. And Anna Navarro had just learned something the hard way. Karoline Leavitt may be young, but she was already leading the room. Anna Navarro took a sip from her glass, composing herself behind a tightened smile. But her eyes had changed. No longer amused, no longer dismissive. Now they were defensive. The moderator tried to move on. Anna, would you like to respond to Karoline's claim about results? Anna leaned in, her voice laced with calculated calm. You're very good at sound bites, Karoline, she said. But that's not policy. That's performance. You know how to stir people. But when it comes to actual governing, to negotiating, to walking into rooms full of leaders and earning respect, you don't just show up with slogans. You need to show up with substance. Carolina didn't blink. I earned respect the hard way, Anna, by walking into rooms where no one thought I belonged and proving I did. Not by hosting a panel, not by mocking people's beliefs on daytime television, but by doing the work. The crowd stirred again. Her voice hadn't risen, but something in its steadiness made the whole room feel hotter. Navarro pressed forward. Doing the work? Karoline, you've been in politics less time than some of us have hosted brunch segments. You weren't elected. You were appointed. You're not the voice of the people. You're the voice of whoever handed you the script. Gasps. Karoline straightened her back, then looked directly at her opponent. No one handed me anything, Anna. Not the people I worked for. Not the platform I built. And certainly not the truth I speak. She turned to the moderator. You asked earlier what young conservatives want? We want a lead. And we're tired of waiting for people like Anna to tell us when we're ready. Because when they say you're not ready, what they mean is you don't agree with me. Then she faced Anna again, eyes like steel. You mock my experience because you fear what it represents. The end of your monopoly on who gets to speak, who gets to lead, and who gets to define what makes someone worthy. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause. Navarro sat back, arms crossed, lips tight. Karoline pressed on. I'm 27. You think that's a weakness. I think it's my edge. I'm not jaded. I'm not bought. And I'm not here to play nice with the system you helped protect. Anna opened her mouth to counter, but it was too late. Karoline's voice had already taken hold. In the studio, on social media, and in the hearts of everyone watching who had ever been told, you're too young. You're not ready. Stay quiet until we say so. That night, millions saw what happens when someone refuses to wait their turn. Karoline wasn't just speaking. She was shifting the ground beneath them. The studio's lighting hadn't changed, but the tension in the room had thickened. The audience leaned forward, breaths shallow, phones raised. Clips were already hitting X. Comment threads were spinning. But on that stage, time seemed to slow. Anna Navarro adjusted her posture, straightened her notes, and tried to reassert control. I've been in this space for decades, she said firmly. I've watched administrations rise and fall. I've fought for immigrants, for women, for democracy. You, Karoline, are standing on the shoulders of work done by women like me, and yet you act as if you invented resistance. Karoline turned to her, expression unreadable. With respect, she replied slowly. You didn't fight for me. You fought for your brand. There's a difference. Anna's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You don't get to speak for all women, Anna. You don't speak for the ones who pray in silence. The ones who work 2 jobs and still get mocked for voting red. The women who raise kids and raise their voices and don't need your permission to be powerful. That line hit deep. The audience clapped. One woman in the front row stood up briefly, then sat back down, flustered by her own applause. Anna looked genuinely stunned. "You think I haven't paid dues? You think I haven't been attacked?" "I know you've paid dues," Karoline said, "but that doesn't mean you own the microphone." The moderator tried to jump in. "Ladies, let's—" But Karoline raised her hand slightly and continued. "I've been called a puppet, a parrot, a Trump girl, but I've never let labels write my script. I've written it myself, every chapter, and I won't apologize for being young, conservative, and unapologetically loud." She took a breath. "And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's not my immaturity. That's your insecurity." The studio erupted. Navarro flushed. The crimson of her blazer now mirrored in her cheeks. "That's incredibly arrogant," she snapped. "You think yelling makes you wise?" "I think telling the truth makes me dangerous," Karoline replied. Silence. Even the moderator stopped trying. Karoline looked directly at the camera now, her voice lower, more intimate. "You told me I'm too young to lead. But maybe the real problem is I'm young enough not to play your game, and brave enough to build something different." The applause returned, louder, longer, uncontained. Somewhere backstage, a producer leaned back in his chair and whispered, "We just lost control of the story." But Karoline, she had never been more in control. Anna Navarro inhaled sharply, her composure visibly shaken for the first time in the broadcast. Her voice, once smooth and dominating, now carried an edge of disbelief. "You really think you've got all the answers at 27? She said, almost laughing. "Karoline, you still call your parents to ask how to set up health insurance. You post about politics like it's a popularity contest. You don't know what it means to lead, not really." Karoline didn't even flinch. Instead, she folded her hands on the desk, leaned in just slightly, and said the line that would later explode across every major news outlet, social platform, and living room in America. "If leadership meant thinking exactly like you, Anna, this country wouldn't need leaders. It would need clones." The room fell dead silent. No retorts, no claps, just a stunned, suspended moment. Anna blinked. The moderator's jaw tensed. And then, applause. It began in the back rows, hesitant at first, then rising like a wave crashing forward. Even some who weren't on Karoline's political side clapped, not because they agreed, but because they recognized strength when they saw it. Karoline didn't smile. She didn't smirk. She simply waited for the noise to quiet, and then kept going. "You think I'm a threat to tradition, but I'm a threat to your comfort zone. You built a platform by talking about change, but what scares you now is that real change has a younger face, and it's not asking your permission." Anna leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. She was trying to look unimpressed, but her silence spoke volumes. Karoline continued, voice even and deliberate. "You came into this debate expecting to lecture me, but all I've heard is condescension, projection, and fear wrapped in experience. And I respect experience, Anna. I just don't worship it." Then she looked to the audience again. "There's a difference between being seasoned and being stagnant. I'm here because people are done waiting for permission to lead. They're looking for courage, not credentials." Phones lit up. The clip of her clones line was already being clipped and uploaded. One network producer whispered, "We're going viral in real time." Anna attempted to speak again, but this time the moderator gently raised his hand. "Let's give her the floor for a moment," he said. That was new. For the first time in the segment, the stage belonged entirely to Karoline. She had crossed the line from guest to force, and there was no going back. The control room was a mess of movement now. Directors waving hands, assistants fielding live tweets, a producer yelling, "Cut to audience cam! Capture that reaction!" Because in the studio, something rare was happening. A seasoned TV veteran was being publicly outmaneuvered, not with insults, but with clarity. Anna Navarro tried to recover. "Well," she began, trying to sound amused, "you certainly know how to make noise, Karoline. I'll give you that. But there's a difference between stirring people up and actually leading them. Karoline raised an eyebrow. I agree. That caught Anna off guard. There is a difference, Karoline continued. And the key is whether your voice empowers others or just flatters your own platform. She leaned forward slightly. I don't stand here for myself. I stand for every young woman who's been told to wait her turn. For every voter who's been mocked for their faith, their accent, their flyover town zip code. I've been where they are. You haven't. The air snapped. Anna's fingers gripped the edge of her notes. That's absurd, she said, her tone sharp. I've fought for marginalized people my whole career. Just because I disagree with your politics doesn't mean I don't care. Karoline nodded slowly. I believe you care, Anna. I just think you stopped listening. Another ripple through the room. Even the moderator leaned back, eyes wide. Karoline's voice lowered. You say I'm too young to lead, but age doesn't equal wisdom, repetition doesn't equal vision, and being on TV for 20 years doesn't mean you're still in touch. Boom. A quiet whoa from somewhere in the audience. Karoline didn't pause. She kept pushing. We have a country that's divided, not just by politics, but by generation, by belief, by who gets invited to the table. And I didn't come here to beg for a seat. I brought my own chair. The audience clapped again, louder this time, clearer, stronger, and somewhere, in Middle America, in bedrooms and break rooms, people watched and felt seen. On X, the hashtags began trending. Too young to lead, Karoline crushed it, clone comment was wild. One tweet went viral. Karoline didn't just respond, she reframed the whole debate. Navarro's still playing 2010. Karoline speaking to 2030. And in that moment, it was clear. Karoline wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was becoming a symbol, not of party lines, but of a generation that's done waiting to be told what they're not. Ana Navarro leaned back, her usual confidence unraveling thread by thread. She scanned the audience, searching for familiar validation. But the murmurs weren't comforting. They were uncertain, divided. The moderator gently said, Ms. Navarro, would you like to respond? Anna's voice was tight. I just find it convenient that someone so new to politics suddenly claims to speak for an entire generation. It's arrogant, frankly, presumptuous. Karoline didn't blink. You mistake clarity for arrogance, Anna. I don't think I speak for a generation. I think I speak from it. The crowd stirred again. Some started nodding. A few clapped. Anna looked left, then right. She was losing the room, and she knew it. Look, Anna tried again. I've worked with presidents. I've been part of real campaigns, international forums, press briefings. You've made headlines, Karoline, but politics isn't a TikTok challenge. It's long days, real compromise, and learning when not to talk. Karoline's smile was polite, calm, unbothered. I've done press briefings too, Anna. I've worked 20-hour days. And I've definitely learned when not to talk. But I've also learned when silence is betrayal. That line cracked something open. The audience gasped. Some people clapped spontaneously. One woman in the second row muttered, "Wow." Karoline stood up, just slightly, resting her hand on the edge of the table, but the movement changed everything. Suddenly, she wasn't just a guest in Ana Navarro's arena, she was the one commanding it. You say I haven't earned the right to lead, but what you mean is, I didn't get your approval first. She gestured toward the audience. But I don't need it. I don't need networks to validate me. I don't need an Ivy League resume or 30 years of TV credits. What I need, what this generation needs, is honesty, backbone, and someone who remembers what it's like to live outside the bubble. The crowd clapped again, longer, louder. Ana Navarro remained seated, now fully defensive. Her words came slower, less certain. You think this is leadership? Sound bites and applause lines? This is theater. Karoline stepped back. No, Anna. This is clarity. And it only feels like theater to people who've forgotten what truth sounds like. The audience stood. It wasn't unanimous, But it was loud, and it was enough. Karoline Leavitt had done more than make her case. She'd turned the debate on its head. And Navarro? She sat in silence, for the first time that night. The lights above the set shimmered brighter than usual, but Karoline wasn't squinting. She was locked in. Navarro, once the dominant voice on this stage, sat quiet now. Arms crossed, gaze lowered. A former heavyweight in the media ring, now backed into the ropes. And the audience? They weren't just watching, they were witnessing. Outside the studio, Twitter, now X, was on fire. Clips from Karoline's Clones line racked up millions of views within 15 minutes. Screenshots of Anna's stunned expression trended under "When the Old Guard Falls." Sarah Karoline Unfiltered. Two young My Foot influencers across the spectrum were weighing in. Some praised her fearlessness. Others, even those on the left, admitted it. She had won the room. Inside, the moderator tried to close the segment gently. "Before we wrap, let's give each guest a final thought," he said. "Karoline, you've sparked quite a reaction. Why do you think your message landed the way it did?" Karoline nodded once. "Because it's not just my message. It's theirs." She turned, gesturing toward the crowd. "We've all been told we're not ready, that we're not old enough, not experienced enough. But you know what I've learned?" She looked into the camera now, right through the lens, as if speaking to millions one-on-one. "You don't have to wait for permission to be who you already are." The studio fell completely silent, not awkwardly, but reverently. "People like Anna want you to believe you need more degrees, more years, more TV hours before you can stand up and speak. But I say, if you've lived it, if you've felt it, if you've fought through it, then you're ready." The moderator gave a tiny nod. Anna didn't speak. She glanced at her notes, but the words seemed heavy now. Useless. Karoline sat back down and folded her hands. Outside, in New Hampshire, an 18-year-old girl at her first watch party whispered, "That's how I feel. That's exactly how I feel." In Texas, a mother of 3 texted her sister, "You seeing this Karoline girl? She's fire." Finally, someone who doesn't apologize for believing in something. And in Washington, D.C., deep inside a war room, a senior Republican strategist turned to his assistant and said, "Get her on the phone. We're done waiting." Karoline Leavitt hadn't just dominated a debate. She'd sparked a wave. And Navarro? She hadn't just lost the argument. She'd lost the moment. By the time the studio lights dimmed, something irreversible had happened. Karoline Leavitt didn't just walk off the stage. She walked into a new chapter of her career and left Navarro behind in the past. News outlets moved fast. CNN debated whether Navarro had held her ground or missed her moment. Fox News uploaded the full segment with the headline, "Karoline Shuts Down Age Bias," with one line. But the real action wasn't in newsrooms. It was on the phones, the laptops, the living room TVs. College students texted each other, "Did you just see that?" Small business owners reposted her final line with captions like, "We didn't wait for permission." Neither did she. Navarro released a vague post, "Good discussion tonight. Always value spirited debate." But the comments section was unforgiving. "You got smoked." Karoline didn't debate, she delivered. This is what the new generation looks like. Backstage, Karoline sat with her team. She looked calm, but her phone was buzzing like a live wire. One message came from a conservative senator. "The speech we all wish we'd given at 27. Another, from someone unexpected, a registered independent with millions of followers, tweeted, "Karoline proved something tonight. Being young doesn't mean being small." Anna, still in the dressing room, remained silent. Her staff shuffled around her, unsure of how to spin what had just unfolded. For the first time in years, she had no clean headline. Meanwhile, Karoline looked into the mirror. Not to fix her makeup, but to center herself. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't even smiling. She was steady, because she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about a culture shift, about a generation tired of being talked at, and ready to talk back. And as she adjusted the cross on her blazer and stood up to leave, Someone from the crew, a young woman no older than 25, gently tapped her shoulder and said, "Thank you. You said what all of us are afraid to say out loud." Karoline simply nodded. "I didn't say it for applause," she said. "I said it because it needed to be said." And with that, she walked out. Not as a guest on someone else's show, but as the host of a conversation far bigger than any studio. By morning, the clip had been viewed over 60 million times. Karoline Leavitt's one-line retort, "If leadership meant thinking exactly like you, Anna, this country wouldn't need leaders. It would need clones," was being quoted on morning shows, stitched into TikToks, and printed on t-shirts overnight. It had become more than a soundbite. It had become a standard. And Anna Navarro? She'd become something she never imagined. A reference point for the old way. On The View, her co-hosts tried to salvage the moment. "Karoline was aggressive," one said. "She didn't play fair," another added. But even loyal viewers weren't buying it. One commenter wrote, "If Anna had won the debate, you wouldn't be talking about tone, you'd be talking about points." Meanwhile, Karoline wasn't doing a victory tour. She wasn't calling for headlines or demanding the spotlight. She was in New Hampshire, in a diner, meeting with a group of young women from a local college who had seen the broadcast and asked to speak with her. "I didn't know we were allowed to sound like that," one of them said quietly. "They always told us to be polished." Patient Karoline sipped her coffee and smiled faintly. "Sometimes polished means muted," she replied. "And I'm not here to be quiet." In Washington, high-ranking operatives were scrambling. Some wanted to distance from the sudden fame. "She's too loud, too fast." But others saw the shift. They saw the hunger for something bolder, cleaner, less filtered. One strategist wrote in a memo leaked days later, "Karoline Leavitt didn't just win a debate. She redefined the battlefield. And that's what mattered. She didn't change minds with clever jabs or rehearsed anger. She spoke clearly, simply, and without flinching. She didn't apologize for her faith. She didn't ask for permission to speak. And she didn't back down when told she was too young to lead. Instead, she turned the accusation into a mirror. And Anna Navarro, all she could see in that mirror was her own fading relevance." Karoline walked out of that studio a guest. She left it as a benchmark, not just for conservatives, but for anyone who's ever been told, "Not yet. Not you. Not now." And her response, once just one line, was now a national refrain. In a world where credentials are worshipped and youth is dismissed, Karoline Leavitt showed us something different. That courage, clarity, and conviction don't come with age. They come with truth. When Anna Navarro tried to shut her down with experience, Karoline stood taller with principle. When the room questioned her place, she owned the floor. And when millions watched, she didn't perform. She led. This wasn't just a debate. It was a moment. A moment where a new voice didn't just speak. She redefined what leadership sounds like in a divided America. Because leadership isn't about waiting in line. It's about knowing who you are and daring to say it out loud. Thanks for watching Surprising Stories. If you felt the shift tonight, don't just sit back. Share it, discuss it, and remember, you don't need permission to lead. You just need to step up.